Hey, ambitious dentist, welcome to Start Your Dental Practice, the show for existing and aspiring dentists to take your dental practice to the highest possible level. I'm your host, Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV, founder of dentistmetrics.com. In every episode, we aim to demystify the how to start a dental practice problem by bringing on world-class dentists, influencers, and consultants in the dental industry to pick their brain about how to get past the barriers involved from going from no practice to being a practice owner to owning your own successful dental practice. Today's show features a guest I know you're really going to like. So today we have with us Dr. Joshua Austin, one of the co-hosts of the Accidental Geniuses podcast, one of my favorite podcasts out there in the dental industry. But before you get to know about him, here are a few things you're going to hear about today. So we're going to learn what Dr. Austin thinks of, when you are going to be able to know if you're ready to own a dental practice. Different things about why you may not want to trust even the most reputable person in your local dental industry area. You're going to hear a crazy story about the first hygienist that Dr. Austin hired and then had to consequently fire for something that is truly bizarre. So you're going to really enjoy that story. You're going to learn the biggest battles of running a dental practice. And in all honesty, this typically makes everything else pretty easy in a dental practice. This one area is where most people struggle. You're going to learn about the surprisingly effective form of marketing that most dentists avoid, or at least use incorrectly. And you're going to learn about a modern form of reputation management that can steamroll into major success in your dental practice. So at the end of this episode, you're going to find out where you can get a bonus of my personal list of my favorite dental-related podcasts. So if you want to know some of the great podcasts that are out there, that is what today's bonus is going to be. So just to be sure, listen all the way through this entire interview to get access to that. And so now let's bring in Dr. Joshua Austin. Hello, ambitious dentist. And today we have with us Dr. Joshua Austin. Dr. Austin is a speaker for social media and reputation management. He hosts austindentalseminars.com. He is one of the fantastic host of the Accidental Geniuses podcast. So big shout out to your podcast. If any listeners are out there and haven't been turned on to there, just go to your iTunes and our podcast player and search for the Accidental Geniuses podcast and hit the subscribe button. You'll be glad that you did. He does a lot of other things. He writes for Dental Economics, and he is a big friend of the podcast now. So Dr. Austin, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So Dr. Austin is a private practice owner who was born in Amarillo, Texas, and now he is in San Antonio. Is that correct?
Yes, San Antonio, Texas. Just like the George Strait song, San Antonio by morning, or Amarillo by morning up from San Antonio. So the opposite of the George Strait song is kind of how we did it. But
nice. So you're in Scott Loon territory.
Yeah, Scott was a year ahead of me in dental school.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you have no excuse for not starting a million startup practices.
The interesting thing is Scott, you could always tell, like with Scott, even in dental school, like he would wear like suit shoes, like loafers you'd wear with a suit. He'd wear them like with his scrubs. Like you could just tell like business was his thing, like just by that, and he was just always like really into the business side of stuff. And for, most new dentists when they graduate kind of don't have a clue about business stuff, and he always did, and that's why he is where he is today, and he doesn't have to pick up a handpiece anymore.
Exactly. So tell us about your story. Start us out with your dental school and things like that, and where you went after dental school, how long you were an associate, and what led to you starting a dental practice.
So I started off at the University of Texas at Austin, and so we are not fond of the University of Arkansas. Just to start that out there. I know you're in Little Rock.
Well, hey, not everyone can have a good football team.
Our football team's been terrible for the last 5 years. So then I went to dental school here in San Antonio. My dad actually had taught at the dental school here for years, and so it was this was the only dental school I was going to go to. I only applied to one school, and if I didn't get in, I was just going to wait a year. and apply again. But luckily enough, I got in, did my 4 years of dental school. got out. I worked with a family member for a year or so in a really small kind of boutique, high-end restorative practice that just didn't have enough room for both of us. And then I went on to be an associate at sort of a more traditional family practice in a more urban part of San Antonio. Learned a lot of good dentistry stuff. Was there for probably 3 years or so. And then one day at some point I just knew I wanted to get kind of back on my side of town where I grew up in San Antonio. And so started kind of looking at what was for sale over there. And I just wasn't awed by anything. I mean, everything was old, in kind of crappy old offices with crappy old equipment. And they were asking top dollar. Mm-hmm. So for for the amount of money that I was going to have to spend on goodwill, which, that argument can be made that that's worth something, or the argument can be made that that's worth nothing. I decided, why don't I just build what I want? And did that, and found a space and kind of off and running from there.
So how did you know that you were ready to own whenever, you had to be thinking about whenever you're an associate, and there had to be some kind of jumping point?
Sure. A friend of mine who was a practice owner gave me a book one day called the EMyth. And actually this guy, his name was Willie. And Willie was the associate in the practice I was at before me. And then he left to start his own practice, and that left the vacancy for me to then go into. And so, I think Willie knew kind of what working in that practice was about, and that it was, kind of high pressure. It was very fast moving, a lot of stuff going on. And at some point, he could tell that I was like him, and knew that he was going to, that I was going to want to get out. So he gave me a book called the EMyth, which I'm sure you've read. And the EMyth, if you haven't read it and you're thinking about starting a dental practice, I think it's probably the best book to start on, because it talks about, basically how knowing the technical aspect of dentistry does not make you necessarily ready to own a business. And so it sort of started planting seeds in my mind about, okay, how do I get ready to run a business, and what are some of the philosophies and principles and things like that I need to develop and whatnot. And so that was really kind of it. That was when Willie gave me that book and I started reading it. I kind of said, all right, hey, I think this is something I should be thinking about. I'm at the right time where I feel like technically I'm competent in dentistry. I'm comfortable enough to be out on my own. And I want to be back on the side of town where my people are, so to speak, where around where my family lives, where I grew up, where all my friends lived, where I had a support structure that would help support my practice.
Sure. Very important for every practice out there that you have your majority of your patients when you're just starting out. If you can tap your personal network to fill those first few months, and then have that be your basis that expands and builds upon, then you've got the setting for a great practice. Yeah. So you started the practice, you got it up and running. Did you have any hurdles that you had to get past in that process of like finding the location or?
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I was born in Amarillo, but we moved to San Antonio when I was about 5 years old. And so, I had been kind of in that neighborhood of San Antonio for most of my life. And so, I didn't need to sit down and look at kind of demographic reports and stuff like that. I kind of knew where areas were that were developing, where growth centers were, where there were neighborhoods that were being built up, and where there was a lot of land that was going to someday soon be residential. And so I kind of just sort of knew, because of just living in the city for most of my life, that there was a specific area near where I grew up that was pretty underserved dentally, just partly because the area along the main highway had never been developed. And the building, I was driving down kind of the main highway that I drive down in San Antonio, and lo and behold, I see this building going up. And I thought to myself, like, hey, that would be a great place for a dental office. And drove by it the next day and thought the same thing, and again and again. And finally, I just thought to myself, like, if I don't do it, someone else is going to do it. So why not me? And so that's kind of where it started. And, I mean, I had no idea how to negotiate a commercial lease. And thankfully, someone said, like, hey, you don't have to negotiate it. You can get your real estate broker and they'll do it for you. And, it was just kind of stuff like that, like just always having people to help me with the stuff that I didn't really know about, and kind of developing kind of a personal / professional network of professionals that were experts in whatever given thing, to help me out. I think when you start getting down to it, like with design and all that sort of stuff, I mean, we all make 100 mistakes along the way there. But really just, trusting other people to help you out, negotiate a lease, to design your space, to help you order your supplies and pick your equipment and all that kind of stuff. You got to trust people because you can't read enough. There's not enough hours in the day to become experts on those things. So you just have to kind of trust, a network to help you get up and going.
Of all the things that you trusted for other people to do, which one made you the most nervous?
Oh, it probably still is my CPA, to be honest with you. He and I, it's not that we have a bad relationship, but he's not super fast on the when I need something. He doesn't quite get it for me as quickly as he should. And I mean, I don't know. That's probably the one, I think, because if you screw up there, you screw up with the IRS, and that's probably, the biggest, hairiest gorilla that you could scrap with. Mm-hmm. So that's probably the one. And I know we were talking a little bit before the podcast started about your business. And so I think you're going to have a new subscriber to your email list here after this, because I might be looking to jump ship at some point. But yeah, I mean, that's probably the biggest one. The supply guys and stuff like that, I mean, of course, they're looking to sell you whatever they can to pad their numbers. I mean, I had a supply guy come in, tried to sell me on a system called a cam site. I don't think it exists anymore. But it was a system that would record your procedures, like record video of your procedures. So you could go back and watch them later, like game tape, like a football player would watch game tape. And I had the sales rep telling me like, oh, you need this. Like looking at me straight in the eye and telling me I needed that.
What was the cost?
It's the most ridiculous thing ever. It was like $18,000 or $19,000. I mean, it was very expensive.
If that was the thing, couldn't you just like hook up a camera and the operator or something?
I mean, for him to sit there and stare at me in the eye and tell me that I needed that, like, oh man. So, like sales reps and things like that, like you have to kind of take part of what they say with a grain of salt. Hopefully you get one that you have a good connection with, where that you can trust them to kind of advise you. But it just like building a house, I don't think you build a house or do a big construction project with just getting one bid. I kind of shopped around between the few major supply houses that have presences here in San Antonio and found one, where I think we had a good enough relationship where I felt like they weren't trying to sell me up a river. But that was another tough one, just because that there's financial incentive in it, and that they can really hose you just because they want to get a few extra bucks in their pocket.
Absolutely. So let's talk about whenever you actually went and everything was up and running. You had your opening coming up. Did you do a soft opening or anything like that?
Not really, no. I mean, the only thing we did is we did computer. We did 2 or 3 days of computer software training before we opened, but that was pretty much it. I mean, I specifically remembered it was October of 2009, and me and my buddies do this NFL trip. There's about 6 or 8 of us that go on a trip to an NFL game every year. No particular team, no particular city. We just pick an NFL game and go there, and we're all in a fantasy football league together. And I remember like that trip was sort of the day like that. I flew back from that trip and basically opened my dental office like that. We flew back from Phoenix on a Monday morning, and that was the opening of my dental office was that day. So wow. No, it was not anything spectacular. We didn't have a ribbon cutting ceremony or anything like that. We didn't do, sometimes restaurants will do like where they open a week at a time and they give you free food or whatever. We didn't do anything like that where we were giving out free prophies. Just sort of opened the doors and rolled the dice. So let's see how it goes.
Did you follow? So which school of thought did you go down? Did you hire a hygienist out of the gate, or did you do all your own hygiene in the beginning?
I did not. I did all my own hygiene for probably about 8 or 9 months, and then hired a hygienist starting 1 day a week. And she was in on it. I mean, she kind of knew, like, I had kind of told her like, hey, you're going to be my full-time hygienist. It's just going to take me a little time before I'm ready for you full time. And so we started her at a day, and her day was like Thursday, I think. And she would come in Thursday, and we did that for a month. And then we added a second day, and it's like Tuesday and Thursday, and then we added Wednesday, and then we added Monday, and then we added, a half a day Friday. So I'd say within 6 months, she was full-time. So we're probably within a year and 3 months or so, we had a full-time hygienist, which was nice.
Yeah, that's great. Sometimes it's difficult to find that person that's willing to work one day rather than 5 days or 4 days.
It was hard. Thankfully she had another gig here in town that she was okay with, but she wasn't in love with, and she was wanting to taper down there and then taper up with me, and so it worked out perfectly. It couldn't have been any better, except for the part where like a year and a half or 2 years later, I found out that she'd been writing prescriptions for Vicodin for herself using my name. So other than that, it was great.
Other than that, it was perfect. Huh? other than the felonies. Yeah. So how did you find her? How did you go about finding someone to be able to do that?
So she had worked for a friend of mine up in a little town outside of Boston called Hutto. And so my buddy John had called me and said, hey, she had been his full-time hygienist. Hey, my hygienist is moving to San Antonio. She's really great. We both had the same dental software, which is Mac Practice, and not everybody is, that's kind of a small community. Sure. He said, hey, she knows Mac Practice. She's really good. She's dependable. He didn't inform me that she liked Vicodin. But other than that, he said, she's great. I vouch for her. And she really was. She was a great employee until the whole prescription drug thing, which kind of flew out of left field. But yeah, she was a recommendation from a guy I went to school with. Who practices up around Austin.
So how did you find out? So we can't just not touch it. So how was she called?
So we were doing our morning huddle one day, and it was the day after 4th of July. And it was like one of those it was a 4th of July where it fell in the middle of the week. And it was like, one can't take the whole week off for 4th of July or half of a week off. So we were back in the office on the 5th, but she had taken the whole week off for vacation. Mm-hmm. And so we were doing our morning huddle, and the phone rang, and one of the, ladies up front went to go answer it. And she came back in the room and she said, it's HEB, which is a local grocery store. It's HEB Pharmacy calling. They need to verify a prescription for Stacy. And so I was like, what? So I picked it up, and it was a pharmacist, or it's actually a pharmacist intern, who was saying like, hey, we got this message called in last night on our answering machine, and it seems fishy. Like, did you call this in? And like, no, I didn't call it in. So I told my front desk, I said, get Stacy here right now. And so they called her, and she came in, and I just said, explain yourself. And she's like, I can't, like, you caught me. Like, all right, like, pack your stuff and go. You're lucky I'm not turning you into the state board. But I said, I'll be keeping an eye on you. And if this happens again, I will report you to the state board. So go get yourself clean, figure out what you need to do. And I don't want to see you again. So that's what happened. But thankfully, and I was so bummed because she was kind of like one of my best employees. But thankfully it just so happened I found like the best hygienist in the world. And she started like the next day, and it's been just perfect. Her and I click so well. We have the same philosophy on a lot of stuff, and she's just amazing. So it worked out for the best.
Yeah, well, that's a scary story for a bunch of people out there. You know, is there any like food for thought that you could give to people that might be able to be aware of that, so that kind of thing doesn't happen to them as well? Yeah.
So this was before. Nowadays, at least in Texas, and I don't know, I guess this is a nationwide thing. Nowadays, Vicodin is now considered a Schedule II drug. Mm-hmm. And so it has to have a written prescription, at least here in Texas. I don't know about outside of the state. So nowadays, at least it couldn't be done with Vicodin. But there were just no indicators with her as far as why, as far as that would be sort of something she was into. She was never late. She was always on time. She never called in sick. There was never really anything to suspect that would be something that would happen, to me, and especially from her. And so, sometimes it's just the people you least expect that are, I've never been embezzled that I know of.
I would argue that is a form of it. She was.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's not money, but it's certainly a sticky legal thing. Mm-hmm. And so, but every time you talk to somebody who's been embezzled from, it's always like, I trusted that woman or man. It's almost always a woman, but I trusted that person completely, and they'd be the last person I'd ever expect, and so you hear that routinely. And so the only thing I guess is I just say, keep your head on a swivel, never be surprised by anything. But you like to think that the people you work with are kind of like your family, and you spend more time with them than you spend with, at home. And you think you have a good feel for, picking up on those kind of things. And I think in reality, I think we don't. We all have little holes in our radar, and we all like to assume the best about people. I think when I confronted her about the Vicodin thing, it was such an interesting thing. She had a baby. I don't know, the baby was probably 3 or 4 months old at this point. And
wow.
She really, she said, she came out and said this when I said, explain yourself. She said, it hurt to have sex with my husband, and so I needed pills so that I could do that. And so I don't know what she expected me to say to that. Like, I don't know, like, talk to your OBGYN.
Yeah.
Like, that's not my problem. Like, I don't quite understand that response. And so it was just such an interesting thing.
It's bizarre.
It's very bizarre. Yeah, very, very bizarre. And she insisted that she never took it when she was at the office, and that she never, was altered while she was seeing patients or whatever. And then it was strictly, just for her husband. I say it all the time, like, people never cease to amaze me. And we see it all the time. Generally it's with our patients who, confirm and cancel, or confirm and no show, or skip out on a bill, or whatever it may be. But sometimes you get kind of blindsided by your staff, and that's a hard thing to take, because you feel like you trusted them so much, and you've got a good radar. And I think sometimes we don't.
So being blindsided by your staff, are there any other things that you're blindsided by whenever you started the practice that you weren't anticipating?
Not particularly. I think staff is just the biggest thing. It's the biggest battle every day. And not that it's a battle every day, but it just sort of managing people and all these personalities together. That's the hardest part of owning a business. The dentistry stuff is, for the most part, relatively simple. It's the same 5 or 6 or 7 procedures just over and over and over. The patient care stuff for me, and keeping patients happy and whatnot, I think has never been a problem. But staff, just, managing personalities is just a tough thing. And generally speaking, this is a broad generalization, but generally speaking, auxiliary staff in a dental office are female for the most part. Not to say
95%, 98% probably. Yeah.
Either way, either for a male or a female dentist, I almost feel even more sorry for female dentists who have to deal with entirely female staffs, just because of the way that sometimes females treat each other. It's a very hard thing for a man to manage, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 women.
I can't marry my wife.
Yeah, exactly. So it's my dad used to say it's the curse of dentistry, that in dentistry, you work with women all day. And so that's just a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing for me my staff early on were all women that were older than me. And so, that's a hard thing for, a woman who's, I'm basically her son's age, who my business assistant, I'm basically her son's age, and I'm barking orders out at her. It's just an interesting dynamic. And so I think, I don't think anybody can be a master of managing staff. I think you just sort of juggle it the best you can and get through it. And just hope that you get the right cocktail of people together, that they work together and they play well together, and that they care for each other and all that kind of stuff. But that's the hardest thing, is staff, and it takes tinkering, and it takes time. And I had the wrong employees to start. All the 3 employees I had with me in my first year, none of them are with me anymore, and haven't been for at least 2 or 3 years now. So, it's finding good people, and then keeping good people is really hard, and then keeping them all friendly to each other, surviving the day is a whole nother challenge.
So looking back to those first 3 or 4 years, like you said, whenever the first people you had there are no longer with you, yeah. Were there ever any moments where the writing felt like it was on the wall, that you thought, I don't really think this person was working out with me, and then you just let that kind of go for a few months?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. My first receptionist, business assistant, was a very sweet lady. She was older, had a really hard time with computers. And I remember specifically, so like I said before, I have Mac practice. And like she used to call it Mick practice, like it was McDonald's patient management software. And it started as like a minor annoyance, and it kept escalating to like, just like, if Jeanette says Mick practice one more time, I'm going to stab her in the face. And then like, amongst other like little things where it's like, I would set up these systems where it's like, if this, then that, if that, then this, that very simple kind of linear decisions. And she would mess those kind of things up all the time. And so just didn't have sort of the problem solving skills to be able to make it through a day. And I just avoided having to deal with it for a long time. And then finally one day I said, you know what, like I've got to pull this Band-Aid off. And was a wreck about it all day long, and finally did it at the end of the day. And it's one of the best feelings I've ever had in my life. Like when that was over and done with, and I knew like, okay, this person is gone and I don't have to mess with this anymore. And yeah, firing her sucked. And
I was assuming you were talking about afterwards, not the actual act.
Yeah, like after I was done, like having to go through that, having to tell her like, hey, I gotta let you go. It was hard, but then when it was done, it was like, oh my God, I feel so much better. So sometimes you just have to do it, and you always know about it way before, and you just like, nah, I don't want to do it. And then finally you have to do it, and then you feel amazing, and it's like the weight is lifted off. So
we have a lot of clients that have had that same dilemma, and they've talked to me about employees. I said, if your mindset is this far down the road, unless they change something so drastically, I think you've already made your decision. You need to go ahead and do it. And then, they'll be with us for 6 months to a year, and we'll continue that over and over and over again. And then finally they do it, and they are so much happier.
Absolutely. And it's almost immediate too.
Mm-hmm. And in some of the practices, they've gotten people in to replace that person that do mesh well, and their numbers just go up.
Oh, it changes immediately. Yeah.
Because it's just like, oh, that cog was so deficient in the wheel that we're trying to build here.
Right.
When you took it out and put the new one in, and just started turning again.
It's so much more efficient. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I distinctly remember like the night before having to do it, I watched the movie Moneyball again. And there's a good scene in that where I think Brad Pitt tells Jonah Hill he's got to tell a player he's traded. And he just says like, just come out and tell him. And so that's kind of what I did. I just kind of came in and said, hey, Jeanette, I got to let you go. It's just not working out. And I need somebody who can do this. And I don't think that's your skill set. And you'd be much better off at another practice where you're asked to do less. And so it was kind of quick like that. And it wasn't a lot of hemming and hawing around and, 30 minutes of storytelling and stuff like that. It was just very much like a Band-Aid, just peel it off and, rip it off and get going.
Moneyball was an interesting choice. I thought you might be, do a binge watch of the Apprentice or something. Some double.
Yeah, or another good one is Hard Knocks. Any season of Hard Knocks when they bring somebody in to cut them, it's always, hey, coach needs to see you, bring your playbook. So I wanted to like have the assistant go tell her like, hey, Dr. Austin needs to see you, bring your playbook. But she wasn't a big manual. Yeah. She wasn't a big football fan, so I don't think she would have gotten it.
If you asked her for the office manual, she may not have known where that was.
I don't think she would have any idea where it is. I think it's on my bookshelf, gathering dust.
Fun. So, okay. Well, so you definitely had some big hiccups there. Staffing is definitely one of the biggest issues we see people have, just because, like you said, you were younger than someone, and they'd been probably doing the same thing for 20 years and had been sufficient at that point. And people our age, we're very process driven, very technology driven as well. And that's one of the things that's so difficult in today's age is there's such an age gap that's so quick. It seems like even someone 10, 15, 20, 25 years, in the scheme of things, 25 years is a bit of a stretch, but 15 years is a world of difference from computer literacy standpoints. So it's very difficult for some people to be able to get past that. And it's always really difficult when someone comes in that we help out that's acquired a practice that the staff, has been basically, using the practice management software as a appointment tracker.
Right. And nothing else.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Right.
So it's always difficult. So that I'm glad you were able to get past that. So you opened up and everything like that. What was probably one of the biggest ways that your practice grew from a business standpoint, new patients, et cetera?
Sure. I think word of mouth referrals have to be the driver first and foremost. And it was, to a large extent, but even at the end of the day, you still need a lot more than that. I did several things kind of starting out. I spent some money on direct mail, which is sort of simultaneously like the oldest thing in the world, and just like judging by myself, I throw all my mail away almost. Like I don't even look at ads in the mail, but like it still surprisingly is really effective. The problem with direct mail is that it's expensive, and there's postage and printing and design, and so it's a big chunk, and you need to do it multiple times, and you need to do it to a large number of households. And it also depends on the area around you. If you're in more of a commercial area, direct mail may not be the best thing for you. So direct mail worked actually fairly well. And I just think I opened at the right time, where early on I got a few good Yelp and Google reviews, and that just sort of kind of steamrolled. And then the next thing we're kind of the highest rated Yelp practice in San Antonio. We've got a ton of 5-star Google reviews. So now it's certainly like I basically don't really do any marketing now other than just like what my Google and Yelp reviews are. And, that works incredibly well because I think people view that as a very non-biased and kind of an independent evaluation. And so, marketing is, I don't want to say inherently designed to fool the customer. That's not what I think, but I think people have experienced enough marketing through the years that has kind of been a bait and switch, or, that kind of thing. And so I think people are just more leery of that kind of stuff now. Whereas reviews, even though you've never heard of, Sandwich Lover 09, you sort of take what they say more seriously than what a marketing piece from a dental office would say. So, that's been a huge thing for me. But it's also, it's hard, and it's, when you get a bad review, it's like, it's super scary, and you get pissed off and all that kind of stuff. But it's been very valuable for me.
So how did you, whenever you got started down that path, is that something that you had to nourish yourself to get going, or did you what turned you on to that being a big part of the puzzle for new patients?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it kind of started coincidentally, because it was early on enough in the sort of world of online reviews applying to dental offices, where I think it was just sort of dumb luck, where I had a couple patients leave me a good review, and then I stumbled across them and was like, oh, this is great. And then I would say then I would see a new patient come in a week later that would say, I read a Google review, I read a really good Google review or whatever. And so it was just enough of those experiences like that. But it really was, around 2009 when my practice opened, I don't think, Yelp wasn't nearly as big of a thing. Google reviews were kind of more for restaurants and hotels, than they were for dental practices and everything that they are now. So it's just kind of a stroke of dumb luck, I think. But I started seeing the power in it pretty early on. And then, I kind of started just building the systems around the office of, hey, when we got a compliment from somebody, let's figure out the right verbiage to ask them to go leave us a review. And so that's kind of how it started. And then it just kind of builds upon itself. And then when you have a patient who finds you on Yelp, they're obviously a Yelp user, so they're much more willing to leave you a review, good or bad. And so my staff kind of knows, like, when somebody says they found me on Google reviews or Yelp reviews, like, not that we treat them any different than any other patient, but there needs to be a little bit of more of a sparkle in their smile, and a little bit quicker with the warm towel at the end and the bottle of cold water or whatever it may be. Like, they just sort of know, like, okay, we want to make sure these people have really good experiences, because they're more likely to be ones to tell ostensibly the world about what happened when they were here. So, yeah, I mean, it happened early, and I think it was just dumb luck, but it's kind of snowballed at this point.
Sure. I'm a big believer in the online reviews. I had an interview with Dr. Leonard Tao, who talks about social media management or reviews and reputation management, things like that as well. And I brought up a point that, it's really it's nothing that's, specifically new online reviews. They've been out there for, 5 or 10 years with different websites. It really just seems to be more mainstream now, and
Right.
a lot more common that you're going to pick up a phone. And if you're in a new town, for example, if you're like the analogy I gave was, if I'm in a new town, I want a burger, I'm going to look at burger restaurants near me.
Right.
And I'm probably going to go to the first one that has good reviews to give them the first shot.
Right.
Hey, does this menu resonate with me? Does this website resonate with me?
Sure.
And I'm sure that's what you're doing too. And to another point of that, I've gone to your practice's website, and it oozes character. I love your website. Whenever you go into Dr. Austin's website, is it joshuaaustindds.com?
That is correct.
So if you go onto it, it starts with like a little automatic video on the website.
Right.
It's not one of those that comes out and says, "Hey, come to us as a dentist," and you're not standing there waving your arms and in a dental outfit or anything like that with weird flash music going on.
No, it's all HTML5, no flash.
Yeah, and it's pictures of people. It's Lego figures of yourself
Yes.
and other people that would be working at a dental practice, and it's just like, I could totally go to this place because this person, is probably one of my people, because I'm super nostalgic about, Legos, and, that was my, my upbringing. I'm not saying I was raised by Legos, but we did have, that resonates with me.
Yeah. There's the big Christmas present I got every year was like a big, 1,000-piece Lego set. The reason I love Legos so much is they always fit. They always fit together. Crowns don't always fit. Bridges don't always fit. Veneers don't always fit. Partials and dentures don't always fit. Night guards don't always fit, but Legos always fit. That's why I love Legos.
Good point. Good point. Very, very, very Taoist there of you. So the reviews, they're here to stay. They're only going to be more important as time goes on. And like you were saying earlier about whenever you moved into the location you're at, if you didn't do it, somebody else would. And it's so much more difficult to catch up to someone who's already doing it.
Absolutely.
Because you don't get a whole lot of chances to be the number one. There's only one number one. And San Antonio is a pretty big area that's going to be pretty competitive in a lot of those places. So that's really interesting that you were able to make that jump and get to that. So is that what led you to speaking about reputation management?
Yeah, so that started with the study club that I'm in. The director of it, is a pretty bright guy, and he's always looking, to fill content. And so basically, he said, like, "Hey, I just was Googling around, and I found, that you've got a bunch of good reviews. Would you mind talking to the study club about it?" And so I did, and just kind of threw some stuff together, and it did really, really well. As far as, kind of the reviews that I got, sort of the feedback I got afterwards from the people in the study club, and a bunch of people were really excited about it. And they, I've done a bunch of lunches with those people on helping them set up their Facebook page and claim their Yelp page and claim their Google page. And, every single one of them says, like, "Hey, you should do this for, another group." And so I got a call from, a guy who ran a study club in the same group of study clubs from another city, who said, "Hey, I talked to Eric, and he said we should have you out. And what's your honorarium?" and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't know like what I should say. But I went and did that one, and that started there, and it just kind of snowballed around. And so now I've got like 8 hours of content on it, including hands-on, and so, I'm giving, I don't know, anywhere between 8 and 20 of those a year, mainly on the Seattle Study Club circuit, because that's kind of where I started. That's the group I was in, and I have a real fondness for that particular group. Although, I think just being a part of any study club is really important, whether it be a Spear Study Club or whatever. I don't think even if it's just, a dentist and 6 other dentists in the area getting together to talk about stuff. I just think having that sort of community is really important. And so that's kind of where it started. And then I got the gig in dental economics reviewing products. And so the guy who I replaced, has been on that circuit talking about, dental pearls for a long time. And he's made a bunch of money doing that. And so somebody said like, hey, you've generated all this content over the past year writing these articles. Why don't you put that in a lecture and start doing that and just adding to it as time goes on? And, so that's kind of where I'm at now. And so I've developed that from a 1 hour pearls lecture to now, 6 or 8 hours of pearls, just based on just the stuff that I have to put out for the magazine every month, just kind of repackaging that for a lecture. And so, I just, anybody who kind of wants to get into lecturing, I'm certainly very early on the scale of it. My podcast partner, Mike DeTola, has been doing it for 25 years. And so he's kind of my mentor in that way. And he's an entertainer as much as he is a dental lecturer. I tell people all the time, if Mike was ordered away from dentistry today, if somebody came in and held a gun to his head and said, you can never talk about dentistry ever again, or pick up a handpiece again, Mike could make a living being a stand-up comedian. I don't know if he'll have a 1 hour HBO special within, 3 months, but he can make a living doing stand-up comedy. He's that talented. And so he and I really get into just sort of the detail, like the nitty gritty stuff of like finding moments and storytelling stuff. And I mean, we don't talk about dental stuff at all when we're talking about this stuff. We're talking all about kind of performance stuff. And so and he kind of learned from Howard Ferran. And so, it's kind of this sort of tree, this family tree, that's kind of sprouting out here. And so not everybody's into the lecturing kind of thing, and that's not everybody's idea of a good time. If you told me I could cut a couple of crowns or give a lecture, I don't know. I could go either way, but if it's, doing a quadrant full of class 2 composites or give a lecture, like give me the lecture any day of the week. I'd much rather talk in front of people than do a bunch of class 2 composites. So I don't know. It's fun. It's fun to meet people. It's fun to go around the country. It's fun to talk about different stuff. It's fun to try to get people to laugh and try to entertain them and teach them something along the way.
Makes sense. So talk a little bit about the Accidental Geniuses podcast and let some of the listeners know what it is you guys talk about if someone's not familiar with it.
Yeah, it's, we're about half a year in. We're on episode, as we're taping this right now, we are on episode 31 of our show. We put out one a week. So we're, 6 months or so into it. And honestly, I still don't think we 100% know exactly what we are. Are we a dental podcast that tries to be funny, or are we a comedy podcast that talks about dentistry? We don't really know. It's kind of just us. We don't really have guests on, mainly because we haven't worked out the technology part of it yet. We record together, and he lives in Newport Beach, California, and I live in San Antonio, Texas. So it takes some coordination for us to do that. And then trying to get another person there as a guest is kind of a whole other thing. So it's kind of just Mike and I talking about stuff. And sometimes they're really heavy dental related episodes, and sometimes they're not dental related at all. Sometimes it's just us talking about, our relationships, or like you talked about before we got started taping here, we did a podcast after one of my dogs had died, kind of just about that and about how much it sucks to lose a dog and that sort of stuff. And so it's a lot about life. It's a lot about relationships. Mike's a big advocate of therapy. He goes to see a therapist, once a week, no matter what. If things are great in his life or if things are terrible in his life, he still goes to see a therapist. And so we just talk a lot about just what we go through on a daily basis. And sometimes it's real funny, and sometimes it's more kind of serious and thought provoking. And a lot of times it's dental related, but it's not always dental related. And we get emails and stuff all the time from people. We have a bunch of listeners who aren't dentists, which I don't know how they even found us, but somehow they did, and they listen every week. And it's fun. It's probably, of all the things I do, it's probably the funnest thing. But that's all because honestly, it's because of Mike. He's so easy to work with. It's, he jumps down a rabbit hole. It's easy to follow him. He knows how to set me up for jokes. I know how to set him up for jokes. So it's just fun. It's a fun process to be involved with, and we have a good time with it.
Well, it's a great podcast, and y'all have done a really good job with it. So, talk to me a little bit about austindentalseminars.com. What do you have on the website for that?
So austindentalseminars.com is mainly designed for people who are either, they work with state dental societies on putting together their state dental meetings, or they're coordinators or directors of a study club, and they're trying to find content and find speakers for their study club. And so it's kind of information that people who put together dental CE would need. But you'll find a couple of different programs I do. One of them is on online reputation management, which, like you said, Google, Yelp reviews, how to build those systems in your office to promote that. And then the other one would be restorative dentistry pearls. And it's got, sort of the beats of the lectures, all the things that people attending those will learn, and how the different ways we can lay those out and all that kind of stuff. It's actually getting redone right now. So in the next few weeks, it'll be relaunched. And what you're looking at, if you go to it as of today, it's actually that's just like a Wix website that I designed, like in 30 minutes on my own. But I've got a company that's actually one of our sponsors for the Accidental Geniuses podcast that's doing a whole new revision on that. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, that'll be launched and ready to roll. So it's you can definitely check it out. If anybody listening, would like to hear the programs, if you're in a study club, forward that on to your study club director. If you're involved with, say, I don't know, the Arizona Dental Association, and you want to see me at their yearly meeting or whatever, forward that on to the people at the office of the Dental Society or whatever. And that's typically kind of who I do business with as far as booking lectures and gigs.
Okay, very interesting. So back to the practice ownership real quick. I always like to ask this of every dental practice owner when they come on, and that is, if you had to start over today, if you didn't own the practice that you own right now, and you had to go back out and you literally closed it down, the practice down today, and then tomorrow you were starting a brand new practice, what would you do differently?
Yeah, there's the first thing that comes to mind is I'm sort of kind of landlocked in the space that I'm in. There's really not any space for me to expand. It would involve another business going out and then opening up the space next to me or whatever. And so I'm kind of landlocked where I am. I only have 4 operatories. I'd kill to have 5. So, if you would have told me that, 6 years ago when I was starting, I would have said, you're just insane. Like, I just can't ever fathom getting to that point where I need 5 operatories. But it happens. And so, I think having a contingency for that, I think would be important. If you're going into a retail building or whatever, that may be tough. And then you're faced with the idea of like, well, do I take on more space and just not equip it right away, or not you finish it out right away, or whatever it may be? But then you're paying rent on that every month. And, those first, that first couple of years, every penny's important. So I don't know. I think that would be probably part of it. I would say I would have gotten a little bit bigger space, or designed it in that where I would have had an option for another operatory at least. And then maybe taking out a little bit more working capital or whatever to kind of pay for those first few months when it was lean, so that I would have an option now to do another operatory if I need, which I could use now. I think being landlocked sucks, in that I'm thinking about, hey, at some point I'm going to need more space than this. Am I going to move out of this building and buy a piece of land or whatever? And that's all kind of talk for like after the main note is paid off in a couple of years. But I think that's part of it, having some flexibility about getting some more space if you need it. My girlfriend's a dentist, or she's my fiance now. That's weird to say. It's only been a couple of weeks.
Congratulations.
Thank you. She's in the same situation. And they actually found like in her building that there was this weird, like 650 square foot space that was right adjacent to hers that wasn't getting used. And somehow, some way, it just basically this black hole of a space. And so she got that, and she's putting like 2 operatories in a storage closet in there.
Nice.
And it was a pretty easy thing. So she kind of lucked into that. And I keep hoping like at some point they'll find some space in my building where we could do something like that, but it's not going to happen.
Trap door to
some secret bookcase where you pull, Beethoven's bust down a certain way, and this door opens and there's some more operatories. But I think that's it. Sort of having a contingency plan to expand, because at least when I was opening, the typical line of thinking was, hey, most dental practices do okay. Most dental practices, if you kind of know what you're doing, and if you just kind of act with some care and take care of people, you're going to grow. And so I think having a contingency for that would be the thing that I would implore people to do. But I understand, when you're first early on, thinking about adding a few $100s extra on your rent to pay for space you're not going to use for a few years is daunting. But I would say that may be beneficial in the long run, if you can swing it.
Yeah, whenever you kind of get to that capacity issue, like you don't have any more time in the day, you don't have any more room in the place. The only options are to hit up double shifts, work at 12-hour days, 6 days a week, or to find more space. And it's neither of those options are very easy, but
absolutely.
Typically, most docs, they like to get more operatories so they can just work out of an extra chair throughout the day, rather than having to work an extra 2 hours per day, or try and staff all that extra time. And so, real quick, I'm sorry that we've gone a little bit over, but real quick, let me ask you this question just came through my head. Whenever you're traveling for your speaking engagements and your seminars and things like that, how do you handle having a staff or running a business with your employees? Do you have them working those days, or how's it work?
It's hard. For the most part, most of my gigs are either a Thursday night or a Friday day program, for the most part. So that makes it pretty easy. If it's a Thursday night program, if it's somewhere in quick striking distance of San Antonio, then I'm, working at least a half a day, usually more than that, 2/3 of a day, and then on a plane, right after that, to get there in time for the Thursday night program. If it's further away than that, then I'm working, at least 3 full days, and then, getting out Thursday morning. And then usually I can get back to work, a half a day Friday, and sometimes that half a day is an afternoon or whatever. But that works out okay. If it's a full day Friday program, obviously I just leave Thursday, after work and get to wherever I'm going to. There are situations that arise, and like this January coming up is one of them. The Seattle Study Club Symposium it's one of the weirdest dental meetings I've ever been to, in that they are a Monday through Saturday dental meeting. They don't care that people want to work during the week. And so I got to be there.
Millions of dollars lost in production for the Seattle Symposium.
Yeah. So, and it's in all places Hawaii.
Not a bad place to go.
Well, it's not bad, but I'd much rather go for something besides a dental meeting.
How's Hawaii in January?
I think it's the same as it is any other time of year. I mean, it's kind of like always 85 degrees and nice. So,
okay.
So I will be gone kind of an entire week for that, and that stinks. Usually I'll have hygiene work a couple of days. I've got 2 full-time hygienists, and so I've got enough people who are sort of on 3-month recall, 4-month recall, who don't need exams, where they can fill up, a day or day and a half or so of that. So there's at least something coming in. I don't have an associate. I don't have room for an associate. Mm-hmm. I don't much have the desire to have an associate right now. At some point, if the lecturing thing picks up more, it wouldn't be bad to have, me work Monday through Wednesday, lecture Thursday, Friday, and have somebody working Thursday, Friday at the office. So that may happen one day, but for now it's just sort of trying to manage it, trying to lump, people in, delivering night guards. So the assistants will kind of deliver night guards and bleaching trays and things like that. Hygiene will do hygiene do cleanings on people who don't need exams. And so it's at least something's coming in while I'm not there, but it can be tough.
Makes a lot of sense. That's a good answer, though, that you can actually have things be going on while you're not there. So if anyone has any other questions about today, you've been really helpful with, and very honest with some of the struggles you've been through. The Vicodin problem is one that is incredibly bizarre. So if anyone has any other questions or wants to reach out, what's a good way for them to be able to get in contact with you?
Email's best. jaustindds@me.com is the best email address for that. Facebook is fine too. Joshua Austin, you can find me on there. So shoot me a message there. You can go to the accidentalgeniuspod.com and that email link on there will send stuff to my inbox. Although Mike Datola will see it too, because it simultaneously goes to his inbox and my inbox. So, if you're sending me anything super private, that might not be the best way, unless you want Mike to see it too. But other than that, email is the best way. You could go to joshuaaustinDDS.com. It's got my office phone number on there. You could give me a call, and hopefully I could scrap out a few minutes during the day to talk to you. But email's probably best.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and we appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thanks, man. It was great. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. A special thanks to Dr. Austin for sticking around longer and providing some really incredible insight to him, his life, his dental practice experience as a practice owner, and all the really good stories that he brings. So definitely go check out Accidental Geniuses podcast. And as you heard, when you have the ability to make the right decision fast, you can free your time and move on to more important tasks. So as a bonus for today, I've created a special bonus of my favorite list of dental related podcasts. So go ahead and text the word practice to 33444. That's practice to 33444, or visit startyourdentalpractice.com/bonus if you're outside of the US to get that list, so that you'll know all the best minds to be following in the dental industry. So that's it for today's episode, but that doesn't mean that the learning and implementation have to stop there. I've created a free report called The 15 Numbers That Will Make or Break Your Dental Practice. This report has been downloaded over 1,000 times by dental professionals. So if you want your free copy of this report that's going to outline what the most important numbers are in any dental practice, and it also includes how to look at your numbers, how to set goals, has a whole slew of really important information that is the culmination of all of my experience as a dental CPA, then just go to startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. That is startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. And so that's it for today, Ambitious Dentist. Again, I'm Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV. I'll see you next week with another world-class practice owner or consultant that will help you start your very own dental practice. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Start Your Dental Practice community. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor and go to startyourdentalpractice.com/iTunes to leave your honest feedback and review on iTunes. It's going to help me create a better experience, a better show, a better podcast for you, the ambitious dentist. Your feedback really does help, regardless if you like the show today or not. If you didn't like the show, let me know, because it's going to help me create a better show and podcast for you. Lastly, if you know of anybody that would benefit from today's episode and today's content, today's guest, please feel free to share with them on social media or through email.